Talk about Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. This was an organization last season that was 4-13, and right now they are 10-5. They're just one game out from making the NFL playoffs. If they defeat the Atlanta Falcons, they make the NFL playoffs. This has been a super successful season for the Washington Commanders. But I want to talk about how we got to this point, and we have to talk about last season. Last season was an abysmal season for the Washington Commanders fan base, but you felt a brand new culture being built. You see, over the last decade plus, the Washington Commanders have been one of the worst organizations in the NFL, not due to lack of talent and not due to fans not showing up. It was because their owner was terrible. Dan Snyder would go down as one of the worst owners in NFL history. From going out there and sabotaging coaches and having a lot of scandals behind the scenes, this man was so terrible that only his close friends and family members only say good things about him. No one else says good things about Dan Snyder, especially the cheerleaders and the players and former general managers. But you saw him go out there and sell the team just a few years ago. And a lot of Washington Commander fans, they rejoiced. We saw the Commander fan base show up to training camp for the first time in a very long time. We're not just talking about just a few hundred Commander fans. We're talking about thousands here. And you felt that culture change within that one offseason alone. But there was still work to be done. You see, the Washington Commanders, they had Sam Howell as their starting quarterback last season. And this was a guy that was drafted. Many thought that he could possibly be a franchise quarterback for the Commanders. He started one game his rookie season. It was the last game of the regular season against the Dallas Cowboys. And he had a couple of good moments. But as the season progressed, Sam Howell regressed on the season. He led the league in turnovers, led the league in interceptions, and he was the most sacked and most pressured quarterback in the NFL. Sam Howell got traded to the Seattle Seahawks. To right now, he is the backup quarterback to Geno Smith. But when you look at Sam Howell, it wasn't all on him. Even though he did have his shortcomings, he wasn't the biggest problem with the Commanders. It was a coaching staff and lack of talent around him. This offensive line was abysmal. His offensive line still has problems right now, but they moved off some key pieces and brought some key guys in. You had Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator. So many people in the national media were speaking highly of Eric Bieniemy. You had people coming out and saying this man deserves to be a head coach. They were calling out certain organizations saying that, hey, they basically went out there and interviewed him just to bypass the Rooney Rule or just to get through that process. When in all actuality, Eric Bieniemy is just a terrible coach. The man did a lot of good things for the Kansas City Chiefs. Don't get me wrong, but he got the coach up. Well, help coach up one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history up to this point. Patrick Mahomes, an elite tight end, and Travis Kelce. But he did that underneath Andy Reid. He was never the head coach with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was just the offensive coordinator in title only. We've had players since then go back and backtrack and say, hey, Andy Reid is very hands-on with the offense, but he will let guys like Matt Nagy and Eric Bieniemy have say-so. Well, Eric Bieniemy got to run the show with the Washington Commanders, and it was terrible. He produced one of the worst offenses in the NFL last season. They could not run the football, and it was a lot of deep shots down the field. In theory, that's not bad for a quarterback like Sam Howell, but considering the circumstances, terrible offensive line, a quarterback that did struggle with his accuracy at times, and he did hold on to the football for a very long time. But why are you calling deep shots down the field when you only have one guy that can separate? And that was Terry McLaurin. You see, the Washington Commanders, they went out there and they drafted Jahan Dotson in the first round. They thought so highly of him, they moved off of Jahan Dotson and they traded him to a division rival, the Philadelphia Eagles. And even with the Philadelphia Eagles, he has been a very underwhelming player. Unfortunately, Jahan Dotson is a bust. And they dealt with wide receivers not being able to go out there and separate besides Terry McLaurin. They're in the bottom of the league. And it all led to the Washington Commanders ultimately finishing 4-13 last season. And your defense wasn't any better. Jack Del Rio was the defensive coordinator until the Dallas Cowboys went out there and beat them on Thanksgiving Day. They fired him the day after, and they let Ron Rivera go out there and call plays for the rest of the season on the defensive side. You have one of the worst defenses in the NFL and one of the worst offenses also. So what do? Brand new general manager, Adam Peters, he finally gets to go out there and he gets to be hands-on with everybody. You ship off Sam Howell, you fire Ron Rivera, you get rid of Eric Bieniemy, and you start from anew. You have the second overall pick. You were the second worst team in the NFL to the Carolina Panthers. It was a lot of connections with Caleb Williams and the Washington Commanders at the time. But everyone knew that the Chicago Bears, they're going to select Caleb Williams with the first overall pick, especially with the trade they made with the Carolina Panthers. So the Washington Commanders go out there, they select Jaden Daniels with the second overall pick, and we're off to the races. You hire Dan Quinn as your head coach. Dan Quinn, you look at him, he's one of the most respected coaches in the NFL right now. He helped the Atlanta Falcons go out there and make a Super Bowl many years ago against the New England Patriots. Even though they lost that game and they were up 28-3, that is still a good accolade to have, to get a franchise all the way to the Super Bowl. And he has helped produce some of the best defenses in the NFL. The Atlanta Falcons defense was very good that Super Bowl year, and he's a former defensive coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks. They went out there and they're trying to build a brand new culture, and adding in veterans, they help out with that move. You also go out there and you bring in Cliff Kingsbury. Many people thought that Cliff Kingsbury was going to be the offensive coordinator for the Las Vegas Raiders this season. Well, not quite. He walked away. He wanted more money, and the Raiders were saying, hey, we're going to only offer you this much. He said, that's fine. He comes over to the Washington Commanders. Cliff Kingsbury, in my opinion, I still have a lot of questions about him. The last time he was in the NFL, he was a head coach with the Arizona Cardinals, and it did not end very well, even though he did have a playoff appearance with Kyler Murray, and they lost to the Los Angeles Rams. But you see they're building things here. You have a veteran head coach in Dan Quinn. You have this offensive coordinator that has NFL experience with Cliff Kingsbury, and you go out there, you bring in this generational talent, Jaden Daniels, at the quarterback position. Leading up to the draft process, many people put Jaden Daniels on the back burner because of how great Caleb Williams was at USC. But they forgot that Jaden Daniels went to LSU his last season and won the Heisman Trophy. This man went out there and was one of the best quarterbacks in college his last season. And he deserves to be put in the same conversation with Joe Burrow in terms of being one of the best LSU prospects of all time. You look at Jaden Daniels now. 22 passing touchdowns to 8 interceptions, but he also has 3,303 passing yards as I record this video. And adding on total of those 22 passing touchdowns, he has 6 rushing touchdowns, which brings his total up to 28 total touchdowns on the season to just 8 interceptions. The man has been phenomenal all season long. And then you look at the rushing yards, 737 rushing yards. I know that a lot of people want to say put Bo Nix in the Rookie of the Year conversation, rightfully so. But the Denver Broncos were a playoff caliber team last season with Russell Wilson. They decided to bench him because of money issues, and they didn't want to go out there and pay him long term to be a shell of what he used to be. So the Denver Broncos were definitely in a better situation last season than the Washington Commanders. This kid comes in to a team that only won 4 games, and they were 4-1 to begin this season. That is how amazing this year has been for the Washington Commanders. And it's more than just Jaden Daniels. This offensive line has shown some promise here and there. They're still very inconsistent. Jaden Daniels is getting pressure on a majority of his throws, but it is better than how they performed last year. It's the running backs that they brought in. Brian Robinson Jr. has been with the team for quite some time now. He's a very good running back. You had Antonio Gibson last season. They basically phased him out of the offense, and rightfully so. But they brought in Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler was with the Los Angeles Chargers. He's a do-it-all running back. Now, he's not going to be able to run in between the tackles like Brian Robinson Jr., but that's okay. He could be a major threat coming out of the backfield in the receiving game, and that's how Cliff Kingsbury has used him. And he has used 2 running backs in this system. Over the last few weeks, Austin Eckler has been out dealing with a concussion that he suffered against the Dallas Cowboys. An ugly loss for the Washington Commanders, but you know what? Those losses are still going to happen because this is still a very young football team and they're still learning how to win. But having those 2 running backs has definitely helped Jaden Daniels see the field even more. Terry McLaurin has been one of the best wide receivers in the NFL since he's been a rookie. This man has played with Ryan Fitzpatrick, Alex Smith, and Taylor Heineke, just to name a few. And he's always produced. He's had over 1,000 yards receiving every single season in his career, except for his rookie season. He's a true number 1 wide receiver. Noah Brown has been a very good number 2 wide receiver. And Noah Brown was a solid player with the Houston Texans and a solid player with the Dallas Cowboys. In my opinion, he's not a true number 2. When I think of a number 2 wide receiver, I think of guys like T. Higgins, even though you could say that he's a number 1 in certain cases. But the Washington Commanders, their wide receivers, they still struggle here and there besides Terry McLaurin, but they have stepped up in the last month and a half of this season with Zacchaeus, with Noah Brown, and with Zach Ertz at the tight end position. Zach Ertz is a man that used to play for the Philadelphia Eagles. Very good for sure-handed tight end at his time with the Eagles. And he also had a stint with the Arizona Cardinals. That is why Cliff Kingsbury brought him over to the Washington Commanders. He knows the soft spot in zones, and you look at his connection with Jaden Daniels, he goes to him third and short. We go back to that Steelers game. He was just an inch away from converting a first down. If they go out there from converting the fourth down to a first down, if they go out there and just get a couple of inches, they possibly win that matchup. But it's no shame in losing to the Steelers, a veteran team with a veteran quarterback. This is a young football team and a young quarterback. Usually rookies struggle in the NFL. This kid came in, and I'm not going to say that he just came in and took the NFL by storm, but he went into Joe Burrow's house, dominated that matchup, and outgunned Joe Burrow. He went against the Baltimore Ravens, and that was a tough game for the Baltimore Ravens. This kid is battle tested, and I expect for the Washington Commanders, if they can make the NFL playoffs, they're going to be a sneaky team in the playoffs. And it also helps go out there and it helps build that confidence and that experience going forward with Jaden Daniels. We also have to realize this. This is a kid that has dealt with adversity. He transferred from Arizona State to LSU, similar to what Joe Burrow did. He's a battle-tested quarterback, and I believe the Washington Commanders will be in great hands moving forward. They just have to go out there, bring in some more wide receivers long term, and you do worry about Cliff Kingsbury and a sophomore slump. They'll deal with that when the time comes. But right now, this is a great season for the Commanders. But it's more than just his offense, and it's more than just Jaden Daniels. You see, when I talked about Dan Quinn earlier in this video, he's a veteran head coach that coached with the Seattle Seahawks as a defensive coordinator. He's made a lot of good decisions in the past. He's a former defensive coordinator with the Dallas Cowboys. He brought some of those players over. See, this was a Commanders defense that was very bad last season. You had Emmanuel Forbes as your starting corner, and he did get benched. They moved off of Emmanuel Forbes this season. Easily one of the worst starting cornerbacks in the NFL. And I'm going to start off with the secondary. Even though the Washington Commanders give up a lot of big plays on the back end, they are still fourth in passing defense this season. Last season, they ranked 28th for majority of the season. That's a major step up. A lot of it is because of defensive line pressure, but I want to give the cornerbacks a lot of credit. Mike Sainristil in the slot position, very good cornerback. This man is a rookie, one of those young players that you look at, and there's definitely something there with him long term. 11 pass deflections on the season, 2 interceptions. And the season started off very tough for him, but he's been a very good football player. You have Benjamin at the cornerback position, solid player to have. Maran Latimore. The trade at the time seemed very good, but this may be a cornerback that you look at, can he stay healthy long enough? And I'm not just talking about this hamstring injury that he's dealing with right now. This is a man that dealt with injuries in the past with the New Orleans Saints over the last few years. When he is on the field, he's a very good player. And yes, he had a tough outing against A.J. Brown and the Philadelphia Eagles. But when I look at Maran Latimore, he can still be a true number one cornerback in the NFL. The only thing that bothers me is the fact of his health. Can he stay healthy enough to be on the field? And I mean more than just 2 to 3 games at a time. Can you give the Washington Commanders 10 to 11 games in the season? And will he be able to play in the NFL playoffs? Because if he can, this could easily be one of the best passing defenses in the NFL overall. When I look at the rushing defense with the Commanders, they're 28th in rushing. Look, if you're a Commanders fan, I've seen Dan Quinn pretty much his entire career. The Seattle Seahawks had a solid rushing defense, but they worried about getting to the quarterback and they played through their secondary. And the same with the Atlanta Falcons. And we saw this with the Dallas Cowboys. They're going to give up big yardage on the ground. Their rushing defense is not this bad in terms of being ranked 28th, but it's still not one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL. They play fast. They more so worry about getting to the quarterback than they do worry about focusing on the run. And when Dan Quinn does put an emphasis on stopping the run, they can do it. Look at what happened in the Steelers game. Najee Harris is a bigger running back. Usually Dan Quinn defenses, they're fast. They fly around. And they have a veteran presence with Bobby Wagner, one of the veterans that he brought over to this team. That's why it's important to be a very good player's coach at times so you can bring in some of these veterans when you get another head coaching job or even when you get your first head coaching job in the NFL. A lot of those players, they fly around. They can get to the running back. If you're a bigger running back, they're going to slow you down. It's the more explosive running backs that they struggle against. And they give up big yardage here and there. And they did a very good job of stopping Saquon Barkley in the second half of that Philadelphia Eagles game. I look at Frankie Louvu. They brought him over from the Carolina Panthers. This man has 8 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 interception on the season. I compare him to Andrew Van Ginkel. These are linebackers that you may not hear much about in the mainstream media, but these are guys that are very effective. They free up everything else for those defensive linemen because they could do so much. They could send them in on delayed blitzes. They can go and cover running backs out of the backfield. They can cover tight ends coming across their face. These are good players to have, and they're veteran players, and you get them for relatively cheap. To be real with you guys, these are not going to be top-end linebackers on the market because some coaches value them lower than others. For Dan Quinn, he valued Frankie Louvu a lot, and it's not for me to come on here and say that Frankie Louvu is not getting paid a lot of money. To be real, in certain cases, he is, but you're not going to think of Frankie Louvu when you think of some of the best linebackers in the NFL. You may think of guys like Roquan Smith with the Baltimore Ravens, but you look at Frankie Louvu, very good tackler, very good with covering running backs out of the backfield, and is just a very good player to have around. You have Bobby Wagner, who is also still holding things down. I am surprised that Bobby Wagner is still in the NFL. This man was regarded as one of the best linebackers in the league many years ago with Luke Kuechly. This is how long he has been in the NFL, and he is still a very good football player to have. When I look at the pass rushing positions, Dante Fowler has been phenomenal this season. Dante Fowler has been a top edge rusher in the NFL. He has 9.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 interception. Deron Payne, very good defensive tackle. They drafted Johnny Newton, and they should be happy that they drafted Johnny Newton. Unfortunately for the Commanders, earlier this season, Jonathan Allen went down with a torn pec injury. But at the same time, Jonathan Allen has been able to practice this week. So if they make that playoff run, he's going to be able to play. And he's one of the best pass rushers on this team. When you think defensive tackles, you think guys that can go out there and just stop the run. Him, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, and Johnny Newton, that's a nasty rotation of defensive linemen to have in the interior. And they can go back there and open up a lot of rushing lane for guys on the outside. I like the Washington Commanders front seven, and it's just very good to see this team finally be pushed into the right situation for the first time in a very long time. And you have Dorrance Armstrong, 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble. You have Jeremy Chin at the safety position. This is a man that was a superstar in his first couple of years with the Carolina Panthers. Then he saw his reps get cut in his last 2 years with the Carolina Panthers. He comes over to the Washington Commanders, very good player to have on the back end. He's not a top tier safety to have in the NFL, but he's not a bad safety to have on your roster. This is how the Washington Commanders pretty much went from being 4-13 to 10-5. A lot of credit given to Jaden Daniels, yes, and to Dan Quinn, but I'm going to give it to the general manager, Adam Peters, and ownership for going out there and turning everything around within just 1 season. I think when we look at quarterbacks like CJ and the situation that he was pushed into last year, the Houston Texans, we started thinking that this is normal. This is not normal. Most rookie quarterbacks that come into the NFL, they're selected in the first round, especially in the top 5, you're going into some of the worst situations in the league. And we see it right now with Caleb Williams. He's struggling with the Chicago Bears. Drake May, there's promise there with the New England Patriots, but they're still one of the worst teams in the NFL. This is not normal. So if you're a Washington Commanders fan, I would say this right here. Just enjoy the ride. Because within the next few years, this could be an elite contender in this division. The fact that you're already in the process of making the NFL playoffs is just crazy to me. And this is what happens when you hit on the pick in the first round, when you finally get your quarterback that you've always wanted since RG3. Yes, they had Kirk Cousins, but they kept franchise tagging him over and over again. And we've seen this team roll the dice. Unfortunately, Dwayne Haskins, rest his soul, never worked out. But when I look at Jaden Daniels, this season right here, his rookie season, maybe better than RG3's rookie season. Because right now, he's a better passer than RG3, and he's not as reckless as RG3. But let me know in the comment section below, how do you guys feel about the Washington Commanders? And let me know if I missed anything in this video. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, I want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless. Peace.